With all the political divisiveness that's taking place in our country these days, there's a lot of talk about the possibility of a second civil war. Certainly, the July 6th assassination attempt on Trump has only made things worse, despite calls to turn down the temperature of rhetoric being used. But what if conditions worsen? Could Americans actually start shooting at each other over political issues? What would happen to our country? We'll explore that today with William R. Douglas, author of a new book, The Sum of All Our Anger. It's all about how and why a second civil war is launched 40 years in the future. It's a fascinating read, and I'm thrilled to have him back on the Lean to the Left podcast. He was with us last October to discuss his futuristic novel about baseball, The Death and Resurrection of Baseball, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Hey, William, thanks so much for joining us today on the Lean to the Left podcast.
Bob, I'm so glad to be back. It's really good to see you. I trust you're well and things are well here in Illinois.
Thank you, my friend. I really enjoyed talking to you the first time around, and I'm sure we're going to have some fun with this one. Let's just get into it. Tell us about The Sum of All Our Anger and why you wrote it.
Yeah, so it was actually born out of the baseball book.
Yeah,
In the baseball book, a civil war has been like the proverbial nail in the coffin that kills a major sport.
yeah.
The Civil War in the baseball book is a strong undercurrent. I like to use that phrase. And in doing interviews with yourself and other hosts, I often get the question, hey, you're going to write about the Civil War that's in the baseball book. I was like, oh boy, I don't know. That's a pretty tough nut to crack. And of course, all that coincided with the rapid escalation in the tone and the rhetoric of our greatly divided nation. I finally said, you know what? I think I need to do this book. Baseball book took about 4 years to write. This one took 8 months to write. So
Yeah.
I got it down last summer
It just came out of your typewriter, right?
yeah.
Typewriter. You don't use a typewriter. That
Some
shows
people
you
do.
that shows you my age, man. You know what? My goal, I've got to get myself a Royal manual typewriter. That's what I started my career on.
Sure, you should.
Yeah.
Antique store. They got the antique stores.
And today I'm sitting here with two screens and a big old Mac, and oh my God. All right. So anyway, back to your book and what we're talking about. It's set in about 2060. You have conservatives claiming that the Democratic Party has been taken over by communists and a new liberal president who's determined to impose socialism on the nation. He even replaces our flag, the Stars and Stripes, with the new flag, representing the new way for America. Now, why did you decide to have the liberal side trying to establish a dictatorship instead of the conservative side, which
Right.
seems to be the way things are today, huh? Why? Tell me
Yeah.
why.
That's an excellent question. When they had the Unite the Right rally in Charlotte, that was a total disaster and unfortunately led to the loss of a human life. I said, I need to really do a deep dive on who the heck are the people involved in all of this. And I did. I wrote an article at the time called Alt Left plus Alt Right equals Alt Danger. And I put it on my Facebook.
Wow.
And I really went in depth to explore these various groups and what exactly they stood for. And of course, given the name of the rally, there was all this focus on these right-wing crazies that were there and doing the tiki torch thing and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously, there were some bad actors in that rally. But what got lost out of all that was really an in-depth analysis of the counter protesters that came to obviously and rightfully counter protest some of the neo-Nazis that were involved in the Unite the Right rally.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I did that research, I found that there were obviously, in my research, there were bad actors on both sides. And I also really come to understand that some of the bad actors on the far left are also actively engaged in protests around the country, and a lot of the things they espouse has gotten the ear of candidates and politicians, and some of them are now in Congress. So I took the idea of the proposition really is what would happen if this far left ideology were to continue to percolate and get more and more power, and eventually take loyalist Democrats that are patriotic and push them off to the side. And this idea of socialism is the cure for what ails our country really comes into prominence, especially in the book, obviously, and it culminates in the election of an openly socialist president. And from there, things really begin to take a tailspin. And as far as the flag goes, there are people on the extreme left that really hate the flag, and they think that it's a representation of white supremacy and suppression, and all the talking points that you and I are both familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in writing this story, obviously, as I just mentioned, there's a socialist president that comes into power. And I was trying to figure out what would be a triggering event that really, really set the fuse alight, as it were. And I thought, what about this idea that the flag is a symbol of white supremacy and should be replaced? And the idea that the Constitution is broken and is beyond repair.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that stuff came together and went in the storyline. And here we have this novel, which came out just a few months after the release of the Civil War movie back in the spring, that got a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the premise of the movie was, as you alluded to, it was these far right people that take power in the movie. So,
yeah, okay. In the beginning of your book, you have Texas seceding from the nation. Is that really a possibility, do you think?
there is a strong and growing secessionist movement within the state of Texas. Currently, the GDP, I guess their version of the GDP, as far as the state economy goes, dwarfs something like, I don't know, a third of the nations of the world. That's how Texas is doing economically. Obviously, in the book, as you correctly note, things have gotten so bad 40 years from now that Texas has become increasingly more powerful and more wealthy because of all the companies that are moving there from blue states. And they decide that we don't want to be a part of this. We're just going to return back to our roots and redeclare ourselves a republic.
Yeah, so that pisses off the president, right?
Oh, yeah.
The
Oh,
new
yeah.
president, right?
Oh, yeah. Very upset,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
And
Did that kind of trigger the fact that this war began?
it's like the opening salvo, right? So the
Yeah.
new president takes the oath of office, and there's a couple of things that the character Devin Cyrus, the president, has done prior to becoming president. He's been this influencer that's redirected some of the phrases that we have now and reframed them. The big thing is something in the book called The New Way Forward for the Country, under this idea of a socialist utopia.
Mm-hmm.
The old way, of course, being the constitutionalists, republic-loving Americans, Republican and moderate Democrats. And then he's relabeled all the three major groups. The libs, of course.
The libs. You have
The
the
libs,
libs
yeah,
and the cons.
the libs, the cons, and the mods. So the libs, of course, being these hard left socialists that have come to power.
Uh-huh.
They, like I say, they have pushed over to the side what they now label as moderate Democrats, which would be patriotic Democrats of
Right.
the traditional sort of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy lore.
Mhm.
And also, I'm sure yourself, you would consider yourself a patriotic Democrat, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Very
Absolutely.
patriotic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's, like I say, he's taken these Traditional Democrats are relabel them as moderates or mods for short. And then, of course, the big bad people are the whack jobs on the right. And he's turned the conservative label into a pejorative and shortened it to con. Of course, we all know that we've heard the word cons before. Always a con, ex-con.
Today we, yeah,
Con artist.
this
That's a
whole country is
pejorative.
being conned right now. You know that, right?
So anyway, so yeah, he's done that as well. All this stuff is just come to a boil. And then it obviously starts with the inauguration. It very quickly escalates.
Yeah, okay.
Attack with an attack on the Alamo, and then just goes off from there. So
Attack on the Alamo. That had to piss off the people in Texas. Yeah.
I would think, right?
All right. How about walking us through? You've already done some of it, but how about walking us through the various stages of your novel and what unfolds? Okay.
Sure. There's the opening scenes and stages and chapters where President-elect Cyrus is inaugurated.
He
He
refuses to use the Bible, right?
He refuses to use the Bible because he's a hardcore atheist. So he takes the oath of office with his right hand and a copy of Darwin's book, Species. He orders the lowering of the Stars and Stripes and
Right.
its new replacement raised in its place.
Which from your description sounds ugly.
Yeah, doesn't it? It's on the bottom left corner of the cover. So picture the current Stars and Stripes and take away the white stripes and make it all red. Take away the blue field and make that green.
Right.
And then turn all the stars from white to yellow. Obviously, you can see the communist colors in there, but also the green represents the climate change fight.
Okay.
So that's how they come up with this new flag, which
Okay.
infuriates half the country. It leads to secession movement that pretty much launches northward from Texas on up to the Canadian border, and then also along, obviously, the deep south in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and also parts of Appalachia,
Yeah.
including West Virginia. West Virginia plays a very important role in the story, as does Oklahoma.
Yeah. Okay. I know you don't want to give away the ending, but why don't you give away the ending?
Without giving away too much of the ending, Bob, I would say
Okay.
that the freedom-loving, Constitution-loving, patriotic Democrats and the freedom-loving, Constitution-loving Republicans all managed to finally get to the end of the war and stop the war.
Like 4 years, almost three
Yeah,
plus years.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct, correct.
And millions being killed.
Yeah,
I think I read, I toted it up. You have a chart in there, and it looked like it was what, 3 or 4 million people killed.
yeah. So one of the ideas behind the novel, if I could back up just a little bit,
Sure.
is for it to serve as a deterrent. And because the idea of having a second occurrence of a civil war in America is repugnant. I find it absolutely repugnant.
Yeah.
And a frightening prospect considering the carnage that happened in the first Civil War, single shot black powder muskets. And now you have a modern occurrence with all our modern weaponry. And it's just a frightening scenario.
Yeah. Sure
And
is.
so obviously, exponentially, in a second scenario, particularly if it's a continental war as far as coast to coast and Canadian border to the Gulf, just staggering amounts of lives would be at risk using modern weaponry.
Mhm.
And of course, admittedly, I wrote a worst case scenario. One part of the scenario is, of course, that the phrase from the old song, kick them when they're down.
Right.
So we're struggling as a nation in this horrible civil war, and an unnamed actor launches a cyber attack, and then there's another unknown actors that decide to attack America from the outside. And all this just adds to the challenges that the civilian population has to face, as well as the both the major military powers that are at war with one another.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in your book, you have a missile attack on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
where Donald Trump apparently believes his image should be. I just throw that in as a little
Well, it definitely
aside.
shouldn't be there. Leave it alone. Don't alter it.
I saw a picture where I don't know whether it was him or somebody that supports him post his image on the real Mount Rushmore
Yeah.
with him pointing to it, and I thought it was totally disgusting. But
Yeah.
why did you do that? Why did you have Mount Rushmore being demolished?
Yes. Very interesting as I was writing this novel, story elements that were already in the outline or already on the page
Yeah.
would pop up as news stories. And it was really eerie, to be quite honest.
Uh-huh.
And this theme of burning all down, this theme that the radicals and the far left have in regards to destroying monuments and destroying, trying to erase our history was part of the storyline.
Hmm.
And there's in the back of the book, I put links to various stories. None of them are with Fox News, by the way. They're all different sources.
Oh, that's
The
good.
New York Times and the Associated Press, and et cetera, et cetera. But all these different stories that had either very strong tie-ins to the plot of a novel
Mhm.
or at least an anecdotal tie-ins. One of the things is it's calmed down a bit right now, but when all the riots were going on, all these calls to, you know, get rid of Lincoln's statue here and there, and
Mhm.
Washington statue and Jefferson,
Mhm.
because the argument was that Washington was a slaveholder, so was Jefferson. The argument against Lincoln, tearing down Lincoln's statue, had to do with him having to be responsible in part for. I had somebody, was it the 13th Amendment? I think the argument was, but in any event, and so this idea of tear it down, burn it all down,
Mhm.
was a very strong theme that you see in the book. And two of the faces on Mount Rushmore are slaveholders, and they've come to be looked at with great disdain by the New Way and the
Mhm.
socialist movement, and their destruction is ordered by the president.
Okay. All right. It wasn't just Mount Rushmore that they went after. You write that on July 4, 2061, the New Way president issues an executive order declaring 10 cherished patriotic songs to be categorized as hate speech and banned. They include, and anybody that plays them, like if they're in the military band or whatever, they'd get arrested and prosecuted for what, treason or something. Anyhow, they included the Star Spangled Banner, God Bless America, and America the Beautiful. Holy crap,
Yeah,
man.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Why'd you
Yeah.
do that?
Again, it's born out of the extreme left's cancel culture that you hear about and read
Yeah.
about, and
Yeah.
all the things they're trying to get rid of, including parts of our history, and including you've got groups of people now that don't want to celebrate the 4th of July because it's a celebration of, quote, white supremacy, unquote.
Mhm.
And yeah, all of that is all those themes that we have now is put on steroids.
Mhm.
And 40 years from now, the pot boils over.
Okay. All right. Now, your second Civil War lasted nearly 4 years, as we've said, and eventually the new way president is assassinated, and vice president, what, he was arrested, right? Or was he
No.
killed?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the vice president was arrested. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
And the Constitution was eventually restored. Now, this happened after millions had been killed, maimed, and left hungry by that war. Do you think this could really happen again?
I think the exact scenario of my novel could happen. Oh, God forbid. Oh,
Yeah.
God forbid. Do I think that if our current trajectory is unaltered,
Hmm.
do I think that we could have a second civil war? The answer is definitely yes. When you look at the divisions that existed in the country before the first Civil War, particularly on the issue of slavery,
Hmm.
when you look at what was being said in public, in debates and other forums, what was being written in newspapers across the land, in the minute,
Hmm.
you could see even then that we were headed for trouble. unless something came along to alter the trajectory of the nation at that time. The issue of slavery, of course, was the preeminent issue of that time as far as the divisions in the country that existed prior to the opening shot at Fort Sumter in April of 12th, which started the first Civil War.
Mhm.
So we have all these warning signs now, the lack of compromise in our political proceedings at all levels of government, particularly at the federal level.
Mhm.
You have this rhetoric, a modern day version of the press, this anger that's expressed publicly and on all the big shows and privately and social media and so on and so forth. And when you take all that and you don't alter the course that we're on, in my view, there's only one logical outcome, and that would be an armed conflict. And so the goal of the book is to really, one of the major goals of the book really is to get the reader to take a step back and say, how do we avoid anything even remotely close to the scenario that's presented in the book? And the other goal really would be, I would argue that just as the left is looking for sane people on the right to purge the extreme right activities, we on the right, the sane people on the right, are also looking to the left to purge from its mists all the extreme leftists that I would argue have a greater degree of power now than anybody does on the extreme right. And so, really, to get Americans on both sides of the aisle to really analyze where we're at, analyze who's involved in our respective political parties and discourse, and literally purge them from our midst because it's no good that they're in our midst.
What would you think would have happened if that assassination attempt on Trump had succeeded?
That's a very good question. I really don't know. I don't think that if he had been assassinated, I don't think that would have triggered some kind of insurrection, if you
Yeah,
want to call it. Would it have triggered a mass outpouring of, I don't know, protests? I don't know. I really
yeah,
don't know. We're
yeah.
typically people on the right, we're not protesters so much as folks that have a particular passion on the left too. There are exceptions, obviously. I remember when the Tea Party movement first started and they had a peaceful march on Washington that wasn't very widely covered, but there were a couple 100,000 people involved in that march.
Hmm.
I don't know. I have to say this, and I'm sure that not only yourself, but your listeners will appreciate this. I was very happy with how President Biden came on
Hmm.
and very presidential like says, hey, we got to turn the temperature down. We got to lower the tone and quiet this all down. I also liked what Senator Fetterman had to say as well,
Hmm.
similar words. And there was a representative from the state of Maine, whose name escapes me, but he hit it right on the head. He said that both sides are guilty of trying to frame this coming election as some kind of thing that we have to vote this way in order to save democracy. And he really attacked that kind of framing of what this election is about. I was concerned about that even months ago when you started hearing this rhetoric about this is a fight to save democracy. I'm like, no, it's not. Anyone can say anything you want about President Trump and January 6th and all the issues that surrounded all that. But there's one thing that's hiding in plain sight that, in my mind, is the biggest argument you can put forth that Trump is a fascist or whatever you want to call him. And that very real fact, historical fact, is that at noon on January 21st of 2021,
Hmm.
Joseph Biden took the oath of office and became our president.
Hmm.
My research in it, in the actions of tyrants and throughout history, especially modern history, is that tyrants don't give up power. They
Mhm.
find a way to stay in power
Mhm.
because that's what tyrants do.
Yeah.
And in spite of all the claims of no need to hash them up, we already know what they are, but in spite of
Yep.
all the claims made,
Mhm.
President Trump got in a car and he left office right on schedule. And President-elect Biden was on the DS at the Capitol and took the oath of office right on schedule. And we
Mhm.
had another peaceful transfer of power in our republic.
One of Biden's first acts after the shooting was to announce that they would pull their anti-Trump ads. And this came at a time when Biden's own candidacy was under attack and Trump's popularity was increasing. Former Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger warned Democrats not to stop calling out Trump for his lies and stated desire to establish a dictatorship on day one. What do you think about that?
I think no matter who takes the oath of office in January of 2061, or pardon me, 2025.
2061.
I'm thinking of the
You're,
year in the book, but in 2025, no matter who takes the oath of office
yeah,
on that day, as scheduled, as per the Constitution, they are immediately bound to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
yeah,
It is the supreme law of the land, and it has hemmed in every president since the founding of the Republic and will continue to hem in every president so long as the Constitution is in place. And
sure.
that's an important element in my book is that this socialist that comes to power at the beginning of the book
Mhm.
really hates the Constitution because, quote, it was written by a white supremacist, Thomas Jefferson, and he has no care for it at all. So
Okay.
he suspends it. What he really wants to do is cancel it, so he does cancel it. But so at that point, he becomes his own law.
Okay.
And as tyrants often do, they become their own law and begins to govern this futuristic dystopian America,
Mhm.
begins to govern it according to his own whims and those of the socialists that he is aligned with and is one himself. As far as, again, getting back to what could happen depending on who's elected, I'm not concerned at all because of the fact that if Trump is elected, he is bound by the Constitution. Anything he tries to do outside constitutional law is going to have a head-on collision with the court system.
Mhm. Except that he's appointed half the Supreme Court, and they've been coming down with these rulings that favor him, and not just the U.S. Supreme Court, but also the judge down in Florida that just decided that she was going to cancel those charges against him dealing with his management of the top secret records from the White House.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know that the boxes of records that candidate Biden had in his garage and he was interviewed about, and the investigator decided not to go forward with charges against Biden for also storing documents because words to effect of the feeble state of his mind. I'm not a lawyer. I wouldn't even pretend to be a lawyer. I do know that the judge did reference the Constitution. I do know that at the time that they did the raid at Mar-a-Lago and found the documents, there were constitutional experts that said that there was some level of immunity because he was the president of the United States. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I think if you're going to have a prosecution on something like that, it has to, by the book from start to end, has to fit within the framework of the Constitution. And the one thing the judge ruled on too was that the appointment of Jack Smith violated the Constitution. If the person bringing the charges has not been appointed under the correct adherence to the Constitution, what does that do to the case underlying the person that's doing the prosecution? So
Yeah.
again, I'm not a lawyer. So
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I didn't want to talk about the judge of those charges, only pointed out that
sure.
the judge was appointed by Trump. That it's things seem to be stacked. He seemed to have stacked things in his favor. At any rate, what message do you want to leave with those who worry about the state of our nation right now?
I think one message would be that it's possible for people with divergent views to come together and have a friendly conversation. You and I are having a friendly conversation. Obviously, the title of your podcast indicates your political leanings, and I lean conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a podcast. So, but if I did, I would invite you on. So,
I'd be delighted to come on, and
but
you could call it Lean to the Right. That'd be okay.
I'm so busy. I'm so busy.
Yeah, I know.
But no,
Me too.
in all seriousness, we have to do a couple of things. Number one is, as I alluded to earlier, we need to make sure that we keep the radicals out of both parties.
Yeah.
We need to re-educate ourselves on the Constitution. And so there's a link at the back of my book where you can it's a QR code, you can pull it up.
Okay.
I think we need to educate ourselves and be aware of what is going on, really on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
More importantly, we need to figure out as Americans how we can dialogue with one another and still be friends when it's over. You have to relearn how to do that.
Yeah.
We used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And in the book, I don't know if you read the bar scene in the book, but did you get that far? Oh, maybe you didn't get that
Where's
far.
the bar scene? Which
Oh, you haven't read it yet. I'm sure you would like it. There's three guys in a bar, and I like to put I like to put little nuggets throughout my books with little things, right? So the three patrons in the bar are named Ron, Don, and Clint. So
okay.
Ron's conservative, go figure.
Okay.
And then Don, of course, oh no, Ron is the moderate, Don is the conservative, and Clint is the liberal.
Okay.
And so they're in this bar in a suburb of Chicago, and they're having this conversation about all the crap that's going on in the country at the time of the book time. And so they all express their opinions, but at the end of the day, they're still friends because they're regular patrons of this bar. And even though they have these disparate views, they all come together at the end of a work day. They come and throw back a beer or a cocktail, and then they go home. But they come back day after day.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get back to a point where we can have these kinds of conversations and then still be willing and wanting to come back and see fill in the blank, blood relative, your neighbor, your coworker, whoever, and I want to see these people again and not shun them. And it's this division where families are divided, coworkers, they don't hang out any longer, and politicians can't figure out how to get things done. There was a lesson in the book too. It talks about the relationship that Speaker Tip O'Neill had with President Reagan back in the 80s.
Yeah.
How well they got along. Politically, they were set in their ways, what they believed in. But very often at the end of the day, they would sit down and have a beer together.
Yeah.
And also when you look at the legislation that came out during that era, it was bipartisan in nature. And we need to get back to that. We need to figure out, especially at the federal level, how you come to the table and you negotiate and give and take, and you get stuff done for we the people. And we the people includes conservatives, moderates, and liberals.
Okay.
Another example is when you look at President Clinton and his tenure and what happened when Speaker Gingrich came on with the Contract for America. And one of the biggest things that came out of President Clinton's time in office was, of course, welfare reform and how it helped try to straighten out that mess.
Mhm.
And that was done through bipartisanship. And certainly another aspect of the book I hope comes out is for me, I recognize that there is what I call a loyal opposition. Bob, you're a member of the loyal opposition, in my opinion, right? So you have
Right.
divergent political views from what I have, but yet by your own words, you indicate that you're still a patriot.
Absolutely.
And you would view me as a part, I trust, as a part of the loyal opposition, because even though I have these views that you don't agree with, that I'm still a patriot as well. And
Absolutely.
we're both,
Absolutely.
we're both supporters of the Constitution, and that has been the bedrock foundation of our republic since
Yeah.
its inception.
Yeah.
And also, I think you're going to like at the end of the book, Bob, the message that's given by Bishop Jackson King at the end of the book. I think you're really going to like that.
Yeah, I saw that, and it is powerful. And I thank you. Um, Anything else?
Yeah, I really hope that your readers will give it a look and again use it as a tool to
Hmm.
get them to.
And it's available, what, Amazon, where else?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble online,
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Okay.
It is being distributed widely now.
Okay, good. Good.
So you just go to my author site, authorwilliamrdouglas.com. You can get to the book from there as well.
Okay, excellent. All right. Listen, I do appreciate you taking the time. It's been fun talking to you, even though I do consider you to be a great patriot.
As well to you too, Bob. I read your bio. I need to refresh myself on Bob's bio. So I read your bio. I'm like, oh yeah, good going. Good job.
Okay. All right. Listen, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video and that you found it interesting and informative. Please visit on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that focus on progressive politics and the important social issues of our time. Now, our interview shows stream on Mondays with special episodes on Thursdays. And you can check out upcoming shows, guests, and topics at podcast.leantotheleft.net. Subscribe to our audio version there and to our video shows here at YouTube. And follow us on social media. Facebook at Bob Gaddy and the Lean to the Left podcast. Now, it's two. Bob Gaddy is one Facebook page, and the Lean to the Left podcast is a second Facebook page. Twitter at Lean to the Left 1. Instagram at Lean to the Left 1, TikTok at Lean to the Left, LinkedIn at Bob Gaddy, and YouTube at Lean to the Left. Now, I hope you'll support Lean to the Left as well so we can keep things going. Just click on the Donate tab at the top of the leantotheleft.net homepage and contribute by buying me a cup of coffee. That'll really help and would be much, much, much appreciated. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.